people aren't even going back to their offices across the country. In New York and other large metropolitan areas, you're still not having a large part of your workforce go back to the office. So I think you're going to have additional difficulties having business travel return back to the levels that we'd previously seen.
Hey gang, it's Monday, March 28th. Zach, Oscar and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Mountain. I am Marcus. Today I'm joined by two folks. Let's introduce them. We start with Zach Goldner, one of our forecasting analysts.
Hey Marcus.
Hey chap, thanks for hanging out. And also, we're joined by one of our directors of forecasting, it's Oscar Orozco.
Hey Marcus, thanks for having me.
Hey buddy, there he is. So, today's fact, why does the US call its head of state president? Well, in 2016, linguist Ben Zimmer told NPR that it comes from the Latin term praesidere, which literally means to sit before. So, if you preside over a gathering, you are its president. This word was used in other contexts. For example, Oxford and Cambridge universities had presidents back in the 15th century. The term president was also used as the heads of colonies like Virginia in the 1600s. But the US was the first nation to use the title of president for its head of state in 1789 with Mr. Washington. That's how we got president.
Impressive.
Yeah, I did not know that.
That's how it happens. Anyway, today's real topic, is travel close to being back? So, gents, we're going to try and figure out where travel's at today. Lots of different numbers to try to corral and get your arms around. To figure out where travel is in its recovery. And then we'll talk a bit about how ad spending is affected as a result of travel. So, at a global level, The Economist writes that most forecasters expect that by 2024, as many passengers will fly as did in 2019. So, we'll get back to pre-pandemic levels by 2024 in terms of flight. The trade body, the IATA, reckons that 3.4 billion people will buckle up in 2022, nearly double the number of 2020, but still shy of the 2019 4.5 billion who were flying. The World Travel and Tourism Council, the WTTC, which represents the global travel and tourism industry, projects that US travel and tourism will reach pre-pandemic levels in 2022. This year. Within America, the world's biggest internal market, demand for seats has nudged above 80% of pre-COVID levels. Foreign trips are also recovering. Looking at hotels, the American Hotel and Lodging Association and Oxford Economics, an economic forecasting company, expects total bookings this year to nearly equal 2019 stays. Surprisingly, at least to me. And in terms of cruise ships, on the cruise ship front, over 75% of CLIA memberships have returned to service, with 100% expected to restart operations by August of this year. Additionally, 16 new cruise ships from major lines like Carnival, MSC, Royal Caribbean, and Disney will launch in 2022. According to the New York Times, a recent survey of cruiser sentiment by the online review site Cruise Critic found just over half of the 6,000 cruisers surveyed were currently looking to book a cruise, with 40% hoping to set sail in the next 6 months. But gents, what's your overall take on travel's recovery at this point? Oscar, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, just as we start to see positive signs coming out of, as it seems we're coming out of the pandemic, or at least, consumers are feeling that way. Now what I think that, many of these travel companies are getting hit by is, the high fuel charges, just the reality of inflation and how high it is. I mean, I believe it's as high as it's been in 40 years. So it's a bit more of bad news, I would say. I think I'm more in line with the Economist numbers. I think you cited right at the beginning, which said that, they expect that travel numbers will be back to 2019 levels in 2024, perhaps a little bit earlier than that. So I'm optimistic, but much more tempered. So the realities of how inflation is impacting spending are real, and that cannot be ignored. I think, another thing I'd mentioned was that the conference, which was in one of the articles there, held by JP Morgan with many of the airlines. They're all positive at the moment, but under that, much of that comes from domestic flights. A lot of the long haul transatlantic flights are not even close to where they were. And not to mention, flying to APAC, which is still very heavily impacted by the pandemic. So optimistic, but with time and very measured.
Yeah, I guess it depends who you are, because Ryanair, who's a low-cost airline in Europe, they were saying that they have hedged out about 80%, 80, of its fuel needs out to March 2023. So for this summer and the rest of the year, they say they'll still be able to pass on low oil prices and low fares to their customers because they've got very strong fuel hedging position, according to Reuters. Not everyone's going to have that, and it's going to be a question of how long can you keep those prices low before investors start to say, hey, we need to start making money at some point. How about you, Zach? Where do you land?
Yeah, one last mark on the impacts of inflation. So what we're seeing as well, even for airlines that are able to fill up seats, they're not able to directly pass along the cost of jet fuel or the additional cost of labor as well. So they're not able to pass along all those costs along to consumers, which is a bit of a worry to airlines. So even as capacity is filling higher up, they're not able to charge the same fees and tickets as they used to for longer international flights and other routes as well.
Fares are down 18% from 2019, according to Airlines for America. It represents 7 major airlines. In January, the cost of international airfares purchased hit an all-time low since Hopper, which is a booking app, began tracking them in 2014. So it's also hard to tell how much of a recovery the industry is in, because it does seem as though, at least up until the conflict in the Ukraine and Russia and the price scare in terms of oil going up, it did seem as though a lot of people, one big reason people were flying was because the fares were maybe surprisingly low. Once they go up, will people have a similar appetite to travel? We'll see.
Yeah, I would say too. I mean, Delta, about the fuel charges, Delta said they would have to collect at least an extra $30 or $40 per the average for them $400 round ticket price, which is pretty substantial. We're talking 10% of that ticket price. So that will definitely keep some people away. And this is purely just off of the fuel cost, the rising fuel cost. So not keeping in mind on the consumer side, again, the inflation and perhaps people prioritizing purchases, that are more key to their day-to-day, right, living, not these more luxury, enjoyment, entertainment type of purchases.
Zach, any other takeaways from travel's overall recovery?
Yeah, I just think that's going to be a very uneven recovery moving forward in what we've seen already. So I do think that you're going to see a handful of growth drivers that are going to get more people to go internationally that didn't in 2021. I know in Canada, they're going to stop doing the pre-entry testing at the beginning of April. The UK is also considering similar measures as well. So as some of these restrictions do go away, I do think that travel is going to rebound. However, you do have other headwinds like that of car rentals. The car rental market is still in a big flux, and that is where inflation is probably hitting the hardest. So I believe that we do have some data here. So as we take a look at what was going on in this last summer, July of 2021, the national average of car rentals hit $119 per day. And that was from Kayak. And those prices are still remaining high. There are other alternatives like Turo that are they're actually offering a cheaper option. But once you take into consideration as well, gas prices being anywhere from $4 to $6, depending where in the country you are, all those factors are really limiting the travel experiences that the everyday consumer can take.
Anecdotally on that, I'm renting a car for about a week. Admittedly, I'm dropping it off in a different location than when I pick it up because I'm going across a good part of the country. It's running, I think, somewhere between $1,200 to $1,300.
Oh my gosh.
So that's that data sounds about right to me, unfortunately.
That's insane.
So we've mentioned international travel a few times and how that's going to take a while to recover. Business travel is another space which seems like it's going to take a while to bounce back, if at all. The US Travel Association Industry Group points out that leisure travel has gone from nearly 80% of its pre-pandemic total in 2020 to close to 100 in 2021. That's for leisure travel, close to 100%. But business and international travel aren't expected to come back to 2019 levels until 2024 at their earliest. And it's not just the travel portion, but also a lot of the things that happened once business travelers travel. Billions of dollars spent before the pandemic were on food, drinks, meeting spaces, and that will largely remain missing given the continued slump in business meetings, group events as well. Are we just expecting business travel to be capped at some point? Will that eventually creep back to pre-pandemic levels? Any thoughts?
For me, I think it's, the 2024 number is at the earliest. I just think business travel is still shaking out and figuring itself out. And that's probably the hardest part of the travel market to really forecast or pinpoint what it'll look like. I mean, we've seen from many of the hotels, they've already pivoted to the leisure travel. That's what the focus has been. Even, reusing or changing their use of certain rooms within the hotel, which were previously used for like conferences and meetings and things like this, and changing them all out to accommodate leisure travels and working out and yoga and doing things like this. So it's really hard. It's really hard to pinpoint what that'll look like. But 2024 at the earliest, I would think.
Yeah.
To me, with business travel, it's hard to look that far in the future when people aren't even going back to their offices across the country. In New York and other large metropolitan areas, you're still not having a large part of your workforce go back to the office. So I think you're going to have additional difficulties having business travel return back to levels that we'd previously seen. So we're going to see it continue to play out in the next year or two. And if we have additional setbacks with COVID, but I don't see the return back for business travel coming anytime soon.
Wondering what can encourage people to travel again. It seems like it comes down to price. Are the prices right for folks? Is it affordable enough? It comes down to COVID cases. The fact that COVID cases have fallen off to, as of March 21st, cases were on a 7-day average of about 29,000 at their peak in January of about 750,000, 7-day new case average, 750,000. It's now down to 29,000. So from 750 to 29,000. Part of it is just cases are lower. People feel more confident traveling. So prices, COVID cases. Also mask mandates though. Mask mandates on planes being extended until mid-April. So that won't help. And mask mandates being removed from pretty much most of the businesses apart from public transport. So I think there's some kind of a psychological block as well. If you knew that you didn't have to wear a mask on a plane, which can be very uncomfortable, particularly for certain, populations, then I think that could open up things a little bit more as well.
I do believe that Dr. Fauci did state that he sees that mask wearing on planes is a thing to stay. So we'll see how that restriction is ever lifted. I do know some people do feel safer and more comfortable going on planes with masks on. So you do have both sides of that story where one of them is comfort and others is some of the population is still worried and concerned about contracting COVID, sitting next to a lot of others.
It's a strange paradox, isn't it? Because you're crowded around a lot of people and you're sat there for a long time, but it's one of the only places where the air is recycled every 3 to 4 minutes. So it seems on one hand like it would be very safe because you're getting brand new air every couple of minutes, but it's also one of the least safe places. At least it feels that way because you're sat next to strangers, like a few hundred strangers for a good period of time.
Well, yeah, for me, talking about pent-up demand, it's a real thing and it's here. So clearly what's kind of holding back this complete recovery are things like what you just mentioned, Marcus, and you too, Zach. It's the restrictions, it's the mask mandates, but continuing to offer flexibility to travel bookers, just getting them back into the rhythm, feeling comfortable and safe, and showing them that the process is maybe better than it was pre-pandemic. Those are really the things that travel companies can do right now. So it's a tough market for them still.
I like that phrase, back into the rhythm of, and to the point about being flexible. Through November 2021, before the Omicron variant hit, the US Department of Transportation indicated just 81% of all flights arrived on time. That's down from 84% earlier in the pandemic in 2020. So less flights arriving on time, and the number of delayed flights also increased from 9%, nearly doubled from 9% to 16%. So that's going to turn people off a little bit as well. Finally, gents, how will travel's recovery this year and travel ad spending affect overall US ad spending?
So Google recently reported their Q4 2021 earnings. They, of course, they've done surprisingly well throughout the pandemic, but, much of the growth they attributed to retail, how well retail had been doing, but travel was kind of the fourth industry they mentioned after finance and media and entertainment. So, we're seeing, stronger growth on the travel side, but clearly it's not quite there. And especially Google with the search connections, right? Travel companies lean into Google very heavily. So travel is a small piece of the pie, but an important piece. Ad spending has been doing incredibly well. Zach, you might be better suited at giving our estimates, but travel is not quite there. So it's not really driving the growth. And so we expect the more of the impact to be felt maybe into 2023 and beyond.
So as we take a look at travel in 2020, it just had such a steep drop off that growth is still very significant year over year going to 2021 and 2022 as well. It will be one of those growth drivers that is going to prop up digital ad spend this last year. I was looking at some data from Merkle, which showed year over year visits on social to travel up 55%. So we are seeing really strong growth on social, which, by the way, we do have new eMarketer estimates that will be published very shortly. We have social increasing up by 42%. A lot of that is propped up by travel. I believe that Snapchat did comment that on their earnings calls that travel was one of their rebound factors. And overall, we are going to see ad spend increase up, but more or less so, we're going to have travel spend from a consumer side outpace that of ad spending. Because the demand is there, these travel companies aren't going to necessarily need to push their ad dollars to get people to come go on trips and go spend with them.
Yeah. Final thing to note from me is that it's going to seem the front of house like things are back to normal. The airlines are putting flights back on. Maybe some new routes are popping up. Maybe seat capacity is at closer to 100% without those middle seats being taken away. So it may seem as though things are getting back to normal sooner than they actually are. Because on the back end, Andrew Charlton of Aviation Advocacy, this is a consultancy, was saying governments have kept airlines afloat with cash. About $110 billion worth of cash, according to the IATA. And airlines are going to have to pay that back. Airline net losses are narrowing, but they're still bad. They lost $138 billion in 2020, $52 billion the next year, 2021, and they're expected to lose a further $12 billion this year. So it's better, but it ain't great. That's all we've got time for the lead. It's time now for the halftime report. Oscar, just one takeaway from you for the first half, please.
Yeah, I'm more in line with the Economist data suggesting that travel numbers won't be back to pre-pandemic levels until about 2024. I think it really does all come down to summer travel. Whether it's good, great, or extraordinary, we will see. I believe it'll be more on the great side. That won't be quite enough to get the whole industry to rebound to numbers that they've been hoping to achieve for a few years now.
Zach, your takeaway?
My takeaway on this is that ad spend is not going to directly correlate to that of the spending from the consumers. Companies aren't going to necessarily need to keep up ad spend because the demand is really pent up and consumers are excited to get back out there and travel.
Interesting. All right, well, that's all we've got time for the lead. Time now for In Other News. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Mountain. If you could combine the precision targeting of digital advertising with the impact of television commercials, you would have an incredibly effective ad channel. And that's exactly what Mountain Performance TV does. Their connected TV software platform allows advertisers to reach their ideal audiences and drive more visits, conversions, and revenue, all from a single intuitive solution that's optimized to deliver performance. Visit mountain.com to learn more. All right, folks, we are back today in other news. Shoppers reach their limits on some price increases and the unique value propositions of various video streaming giants. Story 1. Shoppers reach their limits on some price increases that were meant to offset rising costs, writes Suzanne Kapner, The Wall Street Journal. Apparel retailers are bumping up against pockets of price resistance, she notes. A sign that folks are curtailing spending as inflation remains at the highest level in 4 decades, at between 7 to 8% in December, January, and February, continuing to climb. Macy's said shoppers pushed back when they tried to raise prices on some mattresses and sofas, Bella Dahl faced the same resistance with its t-shirts, resulting in lower sales. Just over 4 out of 10 people said that if prices continue to rise, they'll delay less important purchases, according to an NPD February survey. Just over half of people say rising costs are affecting their ability to purchase goods. That's from a February survey from Ernst & Young. Zach, the way inflation is affecting retail at the minute is blank.
Inconsistent. Inflation's affecting various demographic groups very differently. So as we look at inflation, some product categories are affected more than others. Price increases to automobiles and gas are affecting everyone as the supply chain disruptions worsen. However, as we take a look at more discretionary items like apparel, we do see larger differences in demographic groups. So what we're seeing here is inflation increasing by roughly 7%, but real wages are actually decreasing by 2%. When you take all those factors into consideration. So people are spending less on things like apparel as they're making room to spend money on food and other needed items.
Great point. Oscar?
For me, it's the word is worrisome. Again, inflation is at a 40-year high here. So it's a real problem. I think talking about apparel, since Zach just mentioned it, but with any brand, really, brands need to be very careful with prices. Again, it's something consumers are experienced with. We've just come off of a pandemic. So people are ready to budget. They will prioritize necessary goods and services and hold off from buying things that they don't need.
One point from me, Luke Wathayu, a Georgetown University professor who studied pricing, said consumers are more likely to accept price increases, interestingly, if they are told the product is slightly different. So more likely to accept price increases if they're told the product is slightly different because it cuts the comparison with the past. Thought it was quite interesting.
I guess that's how Crocs can charge 19% more than what they charged in 2021. Not every show has holes.
How, who, sorry?
Crocs.
Oh, shoot.
Are you really in the market for those, Zach?
Hey, they're comfy. They're comfy. A great water shoe, great every day, walk around. And you got some style too. So
Zach is sponsored by Crocs, just in case anyone was wondering.
He's not. A disclaimer, Marcus.
Story 2. Many people struggle to articulate the unique value propositions of the various video streaming giants, according to Hub Entertainment Research, notes Carleen Lukowitz of MediaPost. Ask many consumers what these brands offer or how they are different from their competitors, and they'll shrug. Disney Plus is the easiest to distinguish what makes them unique, followed by HBO Max, Discovery Plus, and AMC Plus, according to this research from Hub Entertainment. But let's start with Oscar. The lack of clear value proposition distinction between the video streaming giants is blank.
It's a long-term problem, not necessarily a short-term one, but it is, if I'm going to be honest, a long-term problem. We know consolidation is coming. I mean, we're seeing it. Discovery Plus and HBO Max, that recent news, they're going to combine in the very soon, in the coming months. Just looking at the survey, 2 things jumped out at me. It was people are still signing up for services to watch a show they really want to watch or a movie. So it's all about good content, original series, and that's costly. So consolidation is coming. Also, the 35 and over crowd, they're still watching CBS, NBC, ABC. They think of them as must-haves. So those people cannot be ignored. These services need to look more like cable than they would like to. So it's a long-term problem.
Yeah. Zach?
Yeah, I do agree with Oscar. I think it's alarming, but not quite a watershed moment for these streaming services. So the disparity between the awareness of the brand and familiarity that was from those surveys, it should be a wake-up call. Top streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime, they could afford to have a hodgepodge of content, as both of those services do have a strong brand affinity. However, for the new players, they have to worry about vying for the everyday consumer's engagement. As consumers have less disposable income, they're prioritizing what content services to have. They want to watch particular shows and movies. So to Oscar's point, they'll sign up for those services in particular, that there's a series that's a must watch.
Great points, gents. That one, Oscar, you mentioned about older folks preferring CBS, ABC. I thought it was fascinating. Yeah. So the question was, when asked if you could only keep 5 TV sources, which would they be? And younger people, 16 to 34, said Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, Disney Plus, HBO Max. However, for over 35s, the list was Netflix, still number 1, but CBS, ABC, NBC, and then Prime Video. Ms. Lukowitz was also noting that among older viewers, Netflix rose from third in last year's survey to first in this year's survey, and Amazon Prime pushed out ESPN from the top 5. That's what we've got time for. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Zach.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you to Oscar.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to Victoria. She edits the show. Thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you tomorrow, hopefully, for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Mountain.